let's start with something funny today. Check this out. You'll get a kick out of this. Because this is a problem that we've got to fix ASAP. Hold on a second.
The White House correspondence.
Watch this shit.
Two. Let me say this simply and clearly. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by it. So you know the thing. You know how we talk about it. Are we the people? Folks, we gotta, it's just, but you gotta, I mean.
This is like a highlight reel.
We gotta reassure, look, my message to everybody I talk to is play the radio, make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone, make sure the kids hear words. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight and then watch the hair.
So weird.
Look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. There's during World War II, where Roosevelt came up with a thing all right,
so we don't have to watch all this, but the whole point is we have a president who is senile. What the hell?
Doesn't want to shut off.
Yeah, it's like, no, watch this. Keep watching this shit. So there's kind of the start of some election talk, obviously. And so that's why I wanted to start with that, because obviously that guy needs to be replaced. And I don't think Kamala Harris is going to cut it.
Well, so the conspiracy theory, anyways, that I've heard, because he's announced now. He put out his announcement at like 3 a.m. in the morning that I'm running for president. And that was like it,
Yeah.
So now he's going to hide because obviously he can't speak and people don't want to be seeing that. So the conspiracy is that at the last minute, they're going to toss him to the side and give the nomination to Michelle Obama.
I've heard that they said that when Biden was running. Remember, they were saying like they were going to do that. They were going to coordinate someone else, or Hillary was going to jump in. I think honestly, the way that I see it, right, is Biden has no idea where he is most of the time. He's just a puppet for the people who are actually running things.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If they can keep him in there, they're going to do it, because they don't. He's done. I saw the other day. He's done less press conferences than any president since Reagan, the senile years.
Yeah.
So it's almost like and a lot of those deep state people have been in there since Reagan. So it's almost we got another one. We got another puppet we can.
Yeah, control and make him just say and do whatever we want.
So, on that note, I wanted to, the other day I was thinking about this, right? Because everyone kept saying Trump is such an authoritarian. He's so authoritarian and evil. And I kept thinking, I'm like, you know what? I mean, I believed it when he was president because the drone of the media was so constant, just like, oh, Trump. But looking back, hindsight is always 20/20, right?
Yeah.
What did Trump do that was so authoritarian? Like, even with COVID, I'm like, okay, he could have locked down the country, but he kind of left it up to the states. Because different rules.
I know he always says, oh, I surround myself with, the best people for all these jobs. But a lot of the people that were surrounding him were giving him, I think, false information,
sabotaging him.
So like Fauci, you start looking back at him and it's totally like, no, this guy he's been in his position since the 70s, probably. You know, it's
Yeah.
these bureaucrats that
Since Reagan.
don't ever get fired that have been in there, just like the deep state people.
Sure.
You know, and he was kind of calling the shots. He kept saying he wasn't, but when you go back and look at all the clips, he's like, well, we should lock down, or we should wear masks, or we shouldn't, you know. It's like, these are the people that need to go away.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are calling the shots behind the scenes, but the guy at the top, that's the president or whatever, he's the one that's in the limelight, so to speak. And they're the ones that get all the crap, even though they aren't, they don't know. Donald Trump isn't a doctor. He doesn't know about coronavirus.
No, but he expects the people he appointed to he appointed Fauci, that's, I think you're right about that too. And I saw Trump Jr. on Tim Pool kind of saying that much. He's like, look, I think Tim Pool goes, hey, I like Tim Pool for this. He asks tough questions of even on people that he likes. And he asked Trump Jr., he said, hey, what do you think your dad's biggest mistake was? And Trump Jr. goes, I think HR. We hired the wrong people. We took the advice of the party, people that we thought were going to be on our side, and a lot of them knifed us in the back.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like these people that are supposedly, the experts, giving them information, and in that kind of position, what do? You don't know who's who. Like, oh, this person here is really great at doing this thing because they've been in there 20 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they've been in there 20 years.
Yeah, they have
the ones that are. Yeah, so it's like, okay, am I going to give this guy the information that we need to, give the American people freedom and good information, or are we going to give them information that we can control? And so that's what they're going to do, because they're going to say, okay, it gives me more power, or our alphabet bureaucracy more power. And we'll just whisper in his ear and he'll conduct whatever we're telling him, not even knowing they're doing the wrong thing.
It's so clear to me now, in retrospect, that the people who were ready to take the reins after the Obama administration were the ones who were the constant thorn in Trump's side, because the Jake Sullivans and the Antony Blinkens, they were the people who were supposed to be in the next administration. And then and it's funny too, because there's all these articles, and we may have talked about this last time, showing how once Trump got in, because of his anti-NATO rhetoric and stuff, the party elites on the right in the conservative party started gravitating towards Clinton, because they knew that they could continue, the uniparty consensus on dumping our money into other countries through wars with the Democrats now.
Well, and that's essentially what a lot of Republicans are doing now with Ukraine.
Yeah,
totally. We're just writing blank checks. I mean, we might as well just be sending them pallets of money.
Yeah,
it's like
we did talk about that, the Iraq thing.
Yeah, I mean, because we sent them weapons. We're still sending them money. It seems like every time they turn around, it's like, oh, they need more money. They need more money. It's like, well, we need more money. I mean, we can't. We're just printing it. I mean, eventually, from what I've understood anyway, between Russia and China and even India now, everybody's kind of getting off the dollar for the world reserve.
Yeah.
So, I mean, realistically, we won't even be able to wipe our butt with our paper to make it freaking worth anything.
Conspiratorial in me, right? When Trump came in, he was the first president to really be aggressive economically, not militarily, with China, and say, hey, we're going to tariff the shit out of your stuff. But also, we have to take responsibility for China, because it was our capitalist businesses that moved all the jobs over there. It's not China's fault, really. But I think the conspiracy head in me goes, that's why Trump had to go. And I guarantee, and Biden takes money from China. So it's almost if you look at who's really being influenced by foreign powers, the Biden people came right in. They visibly took money from China, and it's almost like they usurped. China could have easily bought the Biden people off, because that shit changed when Biden came back in. Of course. So it's kind of in the back of my head, I see that and go, wow, that is kind of messed up. Like, it's almost like China was able to buy our president to get back to normal. And
Well,
even
and yeah,
worse, I mean,
even the whole entire Biden family. I mean, all the way up the chain from brothers, the
yeah,
cousins, family. Hunter,
his
obviously.
brother, there's a whole piece in Politico that came out before he was elected called Biden Inc. about how there's what's the name of it? His brother and his son, Hunter and Biden's brother, had a hedge fund together.
Yeah, is it Jim Biden or something like
Yep.
that?
And what's the
one
name of it? I mean, I've covered it before, but it's like a weird name. And this guy goes into all kinds of stuff and how it takes money from different countries. And even this morning, I was watching this thing on TikTok about, and I think it was, what's that guy's name? Maybe it's Clint Russell or like Benny. What's that guy's name? He's like kind of a right wing commentator, Benny something. But he had this whole
Benny Johnson.
Benny Johnson, yeah, he had the clip of I mean, and the thing is, that's the other thing. My whole thing lately has been post-partisan because I used to describe myself as left or like dirtbag left or whatever, because that's what they called the Bernie Sanders supporters, because we were aggressively calling out bullshit and they're like, oh, you're mean.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's the problem where we've ended up.
we have to
It's
stop
the
using
divide.
those terms because
Well, it's the divide. So I mean, everybody's gone to their camp. It's either left or right, and nobody's having these conversations in the middle because they get more power by us being divided.
do you want to hear something
They don't
crazy?
want us. They don't want us to be together and
No.
agree on anything, especially against government corruption.
This is what's crazy. I've not to interrupt. I've been listening to Malcolm X. Malcolm X's biography. I've been listening to it.
But there's reasons why those people had to die.
Conservatives today sound like Malcolm X did in the 60s. And so to me, it's like it's come full circle where you listen to Malcolm X talk, and back then the divide was more racial because most of the poor people were black and they were the people being cut out. But now it's come full circle. And even Malcolm X talks about the bougie black people in the 50s and 60s, the rich black people that were part of the problem, that were against like that helped hurt the working class and stuff. And I think it's interesting because I haven't finished the book, and I know he changed over time, right? Like when he got into Islam, he put all his faith in this leader, and the leader turned out to be a fraud who was like telling everyone they had to be pure and then like banging chicks on the side and stuff.
Yeah,
and so it shattered him. But he had the right idea, right? Like you also have to remember this guy he didn't watch it, but his father was murdered by racists when he was really young. They literally laid his dad across railroad tracks, so you have that whole history. But anyway, the point I was getting to is I feel like there's a real opportunity now for if we need to like shed that right left paradigm and like just talk about issues because we're on the same side on so much stuff,
And that's why I'm not. I mean, I would get called right wing or something because I think the conservative values align better with my mentality, and just trying to think common sense type thing. It's like if it doesn't fit in that category, I don't want it. And the more mentality that we're like, oh, we can have the government fix stuff, puts us deeper in the hole of losing our freedoms more and more. I mean, they've said it time and time before of we need a China model, which is ultimate surveillance, which that Restrict Act. If they pass that'll be complete government control.
Totally.
Everything. I mean, there are probably already monitoring all this stuff anyways that goes over the internet.
Yeah.
Just basically, it's like the Patriot Act on steroids.
There are files on us. There's files. There's files on everyone. Those buildings in Utah, where Micron was supposed to be, those are all NSA buildings where they store data on Americans.
Well, that's right across the road from Camp Williams. There's a ginormous building over there that, when Snowden came out and was talking about all that stuff was pretty much when they were building that building. And the people of Lehigh tried to put an end to it because they knew all these servers require a lot of water. Oh, we just got something else on here now.
So I wanted to. This is something again I caught on TikTok this morning, and it reminded me because I was thinking about it the other day. The reason Barack Obama beat Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary in 2007 is because he voted against the Iraq War. And Ron Paul, same reason Ron Paul was popular in the later in the like 2012 primary for Republicans. He voted against the Iraq War. Have you? I mean, I'm sure you remember this, but let's watch it real quick.
On Monday, George W. Bush will campaign in South Carolina for his brother, as you said tonight. And you
This is like one of my favorite Trump moments.
And your opposition to it was a sign of your good judgment. In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing, close quote. When you were asked what you meant by that, you said, for the war. For the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should be impeached? Should have been
impeached?
First of all,
I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder.
Oh my God, my computer is like being weird right now. I wanted to stop it for a second because when he said he thought Pelosi should have impeached Trump, or should have impeached Bush, that right there is why both parties hated him.
Yeah.
Or a good example.
I mean, if we knew the amount of people that were making money off of us being in these endless wars, it would probably make people sick.
This is another thing I wanted to play real quick. I think these videos that I kind of pulled up too, I pulled them up just to show how it's like Trump was actually kind of what people on both sides wanted, something different. Someone like, we're going in the complete wrong direction. We just need something different. Bernie Sanders, if he had gotten through, I think he could have won because he was promising something different. Even if you disagree with him on some level, you knew like, okay, he seems like he's honest. Now I'm like, fuck Bernie Sanders because he's sellout. But watch, this is really good because like I was saying earlier, what did Trump do that was so authoritarian when you look back?
I have to ask the question. What did Trump do to deserve this horrible moniker of dictator? Was it lowering taxes? Yes, even for the poor and middle class. Was it the endless regulations he cut? Was it small businesses who were freed up because of those endless regulations? Maybe it was ending and starting the process to end the forever wars in the Middle East. Or perhaps it was the thousands of troops he had brought home first. Hard to send billions of dollars overseas when you don't have wars going on. And speaking of sending our tax dollars overseas, could it have been him also lowering funding to unelected governing bodies who attempt to dictate policy to the United States, like NATO, the UN, and the WHO? Or was it the Opportunity Zone programs for impoverished neighborhoods?
So this goes on and on and on, but I can't think of anything that Trump actually did policy-wise. I mean, he did typical Republican stuff like cut taxes for rich people that Democrats always hate, but Democrats do that too,
Yeah. Well, it's easier for them to blame it on Republicans because Republicans are weak and they don't fight back. In my opinion, I don't agree with everything they do either, but it's like they're coming out and attacking you and like, oh, well, we're going to take the moral high ground and we're not going to attack back. It's like, then you're going to lose.
It used to be the other way around too. Remember, Michelle Obama famously was like, we go high. When they go low, we go high. Type shit,
it's so stupid. It's like, you guys are all a bunch of freaking corrupt. It makes my brain hurt sometimes, But so Biden gets the credit.
If you wake up in the morning, you find yourself in a society where 23.
Hold on. This is another thing that I wanted to play. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, so Biden gets the credit, I guess you could say, for pulling out of Afghanistan. and everybody knows that has a brain in their head that was a complete debacle, and now it's basically owned by the Taliban again. And a lot of the soldiers that were over there are pissed about it because they're like, we lost people over there fighting to take this territory back and liberate them from this oppression, basically. And we just essentially packed up our stuff and got out of there as fast as we could and left Americans there.
That's the thing, though.
Debacle.
But that's the thing that Trump started, gratefully. Like he started that withdrawal, and now it's being used to slander the Biden people. Where maybe they did it sloppy. They don't do anything good. I'm sure they did that. Maybe Trump's team would have done a better job. But it's something ultimately that Trump started, which I see as a good thing. Like once you pull out of those areas, we're going to have problems like that once we start drawing down the empire everywhere. Yeah. And the reality is, these countries, like with Ukraine, for example, right? It's like no one is against us helping them to some degree. But like we've talked about before, people also are intentionally not taught the full history of what happened there and how the U.S. used it as a vassal state and replaced their leader with someone we wanted who was friendly to our interests, even though, and this is something we've done time and time again throughout history. We go into these countries and we say, oh, we're gonna secretly fund the opposition party, and then when that opposition party takes over, the country becomes a mess, and especially in South America, all those people run up here, because we ruined their country. And we sanction them and all kind, and it's like that's the kind of shit-headed stuff that just it's done because, as we've talked about, people make money off the problems it creates, and that's I think
create the problem and then come up with the solution, and it all just requires them throwing a lot of money at it over and over again. Like it's going to fix the problem, but they don't want it fixed.
That's a good argument for Trump too. Is that putting someone in who's as rich as he is, he has no motivation. I mean, of course, he's going to do things to help his family or whatever. Everyone, that's human nature. But at least he's not corruptible at the scale that someone who goes in there with no money, is where they can
wants to make money.
That needs to make a fortune through their job in politics. At least he already has it. So it's almost like someone like him is also. A person with his resources and network is one of the few people who's actually going to be able to crowbar their way into that office when you consider what's happened. I'm scared now after the last election. Will any of our elections ever be legitimate again? We've had a history. I was watching the "Don't Tase Me, Bro" video the other day. I don't know if you remember that, the kid who was at a Kerry speech and they tased him a few years ago, and he's like,
it seems like I remember something about that.
Well, the whole point of that kid's speech was that Kerry had actually won the 2004 election, and that back then it was a different company. It was Diebold, who was connected to the Bush administration, who ran the voting machines, and there was all this proof that Diebold was fucking up the tallies and stuff.
Yeah, well, and that's so
now it's Dominion.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like it may or may not have had the ties that they were claiming it had internet connection and stuff, and that stuff was getting. I don't know. But the really interesting video to watch is 2,000 Mules by Dinesh D'Souza. And that makes some claims with so there's a group called True the Vote, this guy and this lady, and they've gone around to different elections, Republican elections, whoever. They're just like, hey, look, we're just trying to make it a real vote, and counting the votes that are people, not made up stuff that you can get on with the internet, not just ballots filled out with dead people and whatever else, trying to clean up the voting records. But that one showed during the 2020 election so they bought like 1 trillion phone pings in all these counties that were like the swing state counties and stuff. and started tracking like a small sample. They tried to just narrow down a sample that wasn't just getting, a couple of weird things in it. So there was like enough tracking of those phone pings that they were following them to these 3 buildings in one county, and back to these people all random hours of the night as well, to these Dropbox spots. So they're like, okay, let's say every time these people went to one of these drop boxes that they were dropping in 5 ballots. And then they started tallying it up.
See, I don't
tens of thousands of ballots in one night.
Yeah, I don't.
And they're like, if these were all Biden votes, then it would swing the election definitely to Biden.
I don't even think they need to go that far, though, man. Like the way that, like the Dominion thing is a great example. That company's headquarters is in Canada. Yeah. So if they were to audit their voting systems and go, oh, hey, there's fraud, like you guys are counting votes that don't exist, because they don't even need to go as far as like sending fake ballots or whatever. It's all done on tallied on machines that screw the counts up. And Dominion's headquarters is in a different country. So are they subject to U.S. laws if we do find fraud? I mean, they have an office.
That's the thing. What do we do about making an elections free and fair, like everybody claims? And it's like, oh, this is the most secure election. It's like
it needs to be audited. They need to be able to be audited. We need to be able to audit the election and trace every vote back to the originator is what needs to happen. The technology's there to do it. Someone brought up a great point in COVID. They're like, are we supposed to believe that they have like down to the second death counts on CNN every day for COVID, but they can't count election ballots overnight?
I know, right? Yeah.
What the hell is that? Like, that's the weirdest thing ever.
Well, and with the media too, it's like whoever's going to give them the most, I don't know, it's got to boil down to money. I mean, especially after the Tucker thing, it's like, he's their number one guy and they fired him. I mean, there's still stuff coming out on that story, but it's like the media is so owned by anymore, it seems to me it's owned by the Democrat Party.
I mean, it's honestly,
they don't cover.
Can I just tell you something though? The Democratic Party has become the Republican Party. I mean, if you voted for Joe Biden, not a goddamn thing you voted for has been done. Like everything he's done has been. He did do the infrastructure bill, but even that has a giant handout to Amtrak in it. You know what I mean? It's like all the neocons are
Amtrak Joe.
Yeah, but what you said about Tucker is a good segue, because this is another clip I saw this morning that I wanted to discuss with you of him and Ben Shapiro. And I thought when I saw this is why Tucker was so beloved, because even he came around where he was like, yo, I don't buy this shit. And listen, watch this. This is so good. It's, if I can get it to play.
If you wake up one morning and you find yourself in a society where 23-year-olds with 4-year college degrees and like initiative who aren't smoking weed every day, if they can't make enough to buy a car, much less a home, much less get married, much less have children, then why should you be surprised when half of them say they prefer socialism?
Well,
you should not be surprised.
I agree to a certain extent. I think that the question is when the pedal hits the metal. Like you talk in the book about technology and how it's shifting and taking away jobs from folks. Yes. And you make specific reference to truck driving and the fact that there are going to be these automated cars on the roads. So would you, Tucker Carlson, be in favor of restrictions on the ability of trucking companies to use this sort of technology specifically to, sort of artificially maintain the number of jobs that are available in the trucking industry?
Are you joking? In a second. In other words, if I were president, when I say to DOT, the Department of Transportation, we're not letting driverless trucks on the road, period. Why? Really simple. Driving for a living is the single most common job for high school educated men in this country, in all 50 states. By the way, that's the same group whose wages have gone down by 11% over the past 30 years. The social cost of eliminating their jobs in a 10-year span, 5-year span, 30-year span is so high that it's not sustainable. So the greater good is protecting your citizens from, look, capitalism is the best economic system I can think of. I think that anyone's ever thought of, but that doesn't mean that it's a religion and everything about it is good.
No, but
There's no Nicene Creed of capitalism that I have to buy into. What I care about is living in a country where, decent people can live happy lives, actually. And so, no, I would say immediately, no, are you joking? And I maybe would make up some pretext for public consumption, like, oh, they're dangerous. The technology is not quite finessed. No. But the truth would be, I don't want to put 10 million men out of work because you're going to have 10 million dead families, and the cascading effect from that will wreck your country. So
what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I have a CDL and I don't use it right now, but I've kept it and kept up on it because it's like, okay, if something goes south at this job here, you can always go get some kind of trucking job, even if it's at a local excavation company, running a water truck, a dump truck, hauling material, or just everywhere runs off some kind of diesel truck hauling goods somewhere. And I just don't, I'm not against electric vehicles and stuff, or even these autonomous ones, but just to jump in and we got to dump all this money and we got to do it now to save the planet is a way wrong way to go about it. Like Tucker was saying, it's like, a rough estimate of 10 million guys and women. There's a lot of women truck drivers out there too that are just now out of a job, but they don't have computer skills. Even me, I've been a hands-on guy my whole life. If my job was automated, I would basically just have to go off grid and start just producing my own food.
Even if you have computer skills, if you've been watching the news, look at all the gigantic amounts of people being laid off from Google, Meta, Amazon. Yeah. It's all over. And that's the thing.
Where do they go?
Right.
What are they going to do?
They don't have a trade.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. And we've talked about this before is I think kids should definitely be influenced towards like the trades, especially like, plumbing, electricity, construction, that kind of stuff.
There's some of that stuff that you can't have robots do. It's just, the technology is just not there. Just like these big rig trucks. Could you imagine if, they're stuck in rush hour traffic with other drivers and their batteries go dead? Now what happens?
Right.
What do you do with a truck that's full of goods and no battery power to keep the cooler running for the groceries that are going to your local supermarket?
Totally.
It's a disaster waiting to happen, but they're pushing it.
And that's another reason why we have to get our heads out of this like socialism versus capitalism, right versus left paradigm. Because like Tucker said there, he's like, look around. Like, of course people support socialism. Like look at what our country's doing to people who have good intentions. Like healthcare is a great example. I can't count how many videos I've seen of people who are like, I did everything right. I had a full-time job. I had full insurance. My wife got cancer. We lost everything. And we owe.
Well, and that's the scam of the insurance companies. It's like, I have healthcare through my work, and so I've had a tooth removed, and I'm getting a veneer or whatever they call it put in, an implant, and it's essentially the insurance company saying, "Oh, it's not a needed procedure." I'm like, well, is having teeth a needed thing so I can eat food, or they don't want to pay for anything? And the dentist has done their part. They've been resubmitting and trying to recode it and whatever, and every time it comes back denied. Nope, we still hold our denial. I just figured I'll just pay for it myself, and I'm gonna, as soon as open enrollment comes, I'm paying them $110 a month already. It's like, I'll just put that in my HSA and
dude,
I'll be saving myself money.
And that's where there's certain things like Tucker was saying, where capitalism, of course, is the greatest system, but not everything should probably be capitalist. Like healthcare, the last thing you need on your deathbed is to deal with finances. It's like we should be sensible enough that, of course, doctors and hospitals should make money, but the government just pays it. We all pay into that pool out of our taxes, just like we do for police, just like we do for the military. You know, it should be part of something that as a taxpayer you're entitled to, I think, you know, and I think it's cool to see that conversation happening between Tucker and Ben, because Tucker, I think, is someone who I view as intellectually honest. You know, he was doing the work that Jon Stewart stopped doing like 10 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Trevor Noah was terrible. The guy who took over the Daily Show.
Oh yeah.
He was awful. Just a total like stenographer,
Well,
like the rest of the media.
Not even funny.
Yeah, the reason Jon Stewart was so beloved is because he would call out the bullshit in the media, and Trevor Noah was another one of them. He was like part of the bullshit chorus, and Tucker became the anti. And it's like it's cool to see what's happening with Fox, because even that shows you how many sensible people watch Fox and are kind of just like, okay, Sean Hannity, you're whatever, keep saying your bullshit.
Yeah, you're off the rails, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. It's refreshing to see that people are finally coming around, and we just have to get our heads out of this. It's tough though, man, because I feel like propaganda is so good and it's been so efficient over, like, Trump broke people's heads, right? But
why though? That's what I can't grasp, is like, what happened? Because there was like a weird switch that all of a sudden he come and announced, and it was like everybody loved him, everybody wanted him on their show. I mean, I thought, you know, his whole persona stuff was kind of dumb, but
yeah,
you know, I think what he was doing, I got what he was doing, and the longer I listened to him, the more I understand. Is like, okay, this is Trump, and he's from New York, so he's got a different personality, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I could let some things slide, just understanding, okay, this is Trump being Trump,
right?
Not like whatever, you know. So
you knew how to manipulate the press, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, and it was kind of funny because they just jumped in the puddle every time. It's like he'd say something over there, and they'd go, and that's all they would talk about. And then he's off doing his things he is trying to get done while they're distracted with whatever he tweeted. It's like, oh my God, you guys are lame. It's like, this is why nobody watches you guys anymore.
It's funny too, because like to see him kind of coming back into the election cycle now, the press made so much money off of him and reporting off of him. I mean, you can just tell they're like, oh, good, he's back. Like, we need something to talk about.
We need something to get our ratings up because we suck.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I was just watching a thing this morning because, you know, back in the day, I watched like the Young Turks and stuff. And it was this Jimmy Dore and the Revolutionary Blackout Network were talking about when they fell away from the Young Turks. And it was when Jimmy was like, it's when Cenk started taking Hillary Clinton donor money. And he's like, even one of the executives at Young Turks, who's supposed to be like an independent left network, was like, we're going to have to move to the center now. And that's what happened, man, because it is the uniparty. The Democrat and Republican Party, it doesn't matter what you vote for, you get the same thing.
All right, let me see. I'll just play it for you real quick.
The internet was as much information as we've ever had at your fingertips, and the result has been a centralization of information. This is deliberate, needless to say, but unnoticed by most people, that results in more controlled information than we could even have imagined 20 years ago. So a lot of information just is not available. I mean, because it's digital and it's controlled by a small number of companies, the polling suggests that a lot of Americans, I don't mean like hundreds, I mean hundreds of millions of Americans, have no idea what's going on. They don't know the facts about certain things. That it's not just because they're dumb or they're distracted on their iPhones. The whole point of the iPhone was to inform you, and the net effect has been to make people completely ignorant of the core of the actual facts, like the non-disputed facts about a lot of different things. And you saw this certainly during COVID. So that challenges the idea of democracy, which, you know, rests on the notion of an informed voting public, of a citizenry. And we don't have that. And that really, I never would have expected that at all. And last thing I'll say is don't throw away your hard copy books, because they are the repository the enduring repository that cannot be, and I'm dead serious, and I don't mean to, I'm not going to tell you to buy gold and ammo, though obviously you should think about it. But definitely don't throw away your books because they can't be disappeared because they exist physically.
Yep, because they exist.
I am so on board with that.
Digital world.
Yep. Man,
Digital world can be erased at any time.
Everything can be memory hold. I won't even do digital bills. Like I want a hard copy of my bill just so I have a record because they'll, you know, they can rip you out. Oh, well, you didn't pay this. No, wait a minute. I have.
I got a copy.
When I had like I'm out of pocket for healthcare at the moment. I have Medi-Cal for like a backup. Thankfully through the state of California, but when I had full healthcare, I remember when my kids were little, we would take them to this pediatric center, and I would pay the copay, and then they would call me a couple of days later and go, "Hey, you didn't pay your copay," and I'd be like, "Yes, I did. I have the friggin' receipt for it, asshole." Like that's the kind of stuff that, you know, our whole government is doing that constantly, just like overcharge. Like I just went through this with the IRS. I filed my tax return and I owed back taxes. So they took like, you know, most of my money. But I was supposed to get like $300 and then I just never got it. So I had to like call the IRS and track it down. It turns out they like funneled it through this other bank and, you know, to take my money out. And then the rest of it was fees and stuff. So I'm just screwed, but it's like, you know, once you get into the inner workings of how things are, it's gross how many people are just taking advantage of the fraud and waste in government, you know, and it's at our expense.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with the small government mentality, is because you can get a little bit more accountability out of the people that actually work for the government.
Yeah.
The bigger it gets, the harder it is to track down where all this fraud and crap goes. And nobody's held accountable for the people that are actually in those jobs to find the people that are, you know, unless it's a really big fraud, you know, scam that is going to attract attention, and then they'll target those people. But if not, I mean, billions of dollars pretty much every year is scammed out of the IRS, especially. And
that's through the thing that's
a handful of them people get caught and prosecuted.
Because and what's messed up is because of the way that power works, it's never the people with money who are doing the big fraud that get in trouble. It's like the little guy who missed $600 or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
because you can't fight back. You don't have the resources to fight back, and they know you're an easy target.
Well, when you talk about small government too, I think the problem there is what a lot of people mean when they talk about that is privatization, and that makes it even less accountable, right? Where it's like, at least if it's a government agency, you know, you can, through Congress, you can usually punish them or, you know, cut their funding or, you know, there's some kind of
none of that happens.
No, it doesn't.
Even to the ones now, it's like, oh well, they were appointed by someone. That's the problem with the bureaucrats. They're appointed. They're not voted on. They're just, hey, we're not going to put this guy in this spot or this lady in this spot, and they can't get fired. Essentially, they have to be shamed so bad by somebody that they'll finally resign. That's how bad it's gotten.
So, have you heard much about Robert F. Kennedy?
Just some of his speeches where it's like kind of cringe. I mean, he makes sense, but just listening to him, like, oh, his voice is horrible.
Yeah, his voice is bad. That's definitely, admittedly, one of the biggest problems he has, I feel like. But the reason I bring him up is he talked about, he was on Theo Vaughn, and so first of all, Trump supposedly appointed him to be a vaccine czar. In fact, there's articles about it when in Time magazine where they're like, oh, it's a problem that Trump appointed anti-vaxxer Robert F. Kennedy to lead his vaccine task force. And what Kennedy says is that after Trump did that, Pfizer offered him money to appoint who they wanted, and he took the money and appointed Gottlieb. But the thing that's interesting about Kennedy is he used to be an environmental lawyer, and so but he's always been someone who goes after the pharmaceutical lobby, and he wrote a book about Fauci. Have you heard much about that?
Which one? There's been a few people wrote books about him.
Well, so
I've been looking for.
Basically, RFK wrote this book called The Real Anthony Fauci.
Oh, okay.
And it goes through everything, like his whole career. And anyway, I wanted to show you this clip if you haven't seen it, because the reason I think it's important or just good to see is when he was an environmental lawyer, he fought government agencies mainly. And in this clip, he talks about agency capture. And you're right that his voice is a little tough to listen to. Do you know who Theo Von is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's pretty funny.
Theo Von's like one of my favorite comedians. But he's on Theo Von's podcast, actually. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, this is we don't have to listen to much of this, but this is good for. Here, no, hold on.
Almost immediately. Okay. And then I see it discussed by people who are highly critical and know how to read science critically. So I can see them arguing with each other and criticizing this.
It's a little bit. It's hold on.
My lawsuits were against the EPA or the state environmental agencies.
What's crazy too is his voice problem is from a vaccine injury.
The industry figures out how to infiltrate them, how to control the senators and the congressmen that write their budgets, how to get control of that agency because it's so important for their profit ambitions. Right. And so I probably brought over 500 lawsuits as an environmental lawyer, mainly against polluters who are discharging into the environment, into the air, water, whatever. But probably during the 38 years that I was doing that, probably 20% of my lawsuits were against the EPA or the state environmental agencies for issuing these kind of sweetheart illegal permits.
Because they get compromised also, you're saying?
Because they get compromised. So I was used to that dynamic.
Right. That's kind of hard to navigate.
Of seeing the agency that's supposed to be my friend, but is actually my enemy, on these environmental issues. Oh, I was accustomed to that. That dynamic is particularly acute. It's really on steroids in the public health agencies because there are these unprecedented entanglements, financial entanglements. For example, FDA gets 45% of its annual budget from pharmaceutical companies. So they're really, there's really it's kind of a seamless subsidiary of the industry. And it's agency capture on steroids.
So the FDA is funded mostly by pharmaceutical companies.
About half of their money comes from pharmaceutical companies. And that's because we passed a law in the 90s actually in the early 2000s that allows, it's called fast track approval. So the drug companies were complaining that these drugs take 10 years to get approved, and a lot of particularly the Republicans on Capitol Hill who want the agencies to be more industry friendly, they said there ought to be a process where the industry can come in and pay to get a very, very quick approval. And so now
that seems dirty business.
It is dirty business. There's a kind of a rational reason for it. As the agency said, we simply don't have enough personnel to quickly process these applications. So Congress said, okay, well, we're going to get the industry to give you the money to hire the people to process it. But really what happens is the agency is now being paid to do its job by the industry, and they become partners, and they're no longer a regulatory agency. They're really, their regulatory mission gets subsumed by these commercial and mercantile, forces.
Yeah, business, big business.
Yeah.
So we can stop there, but I think he's interesting for these reasons because he's fought these entanglements his whole life.
Oh yeah. Well, and I can guarantee you right now, he will never be president because of his stance.
No, I agree. It's so funny because here, first of all, the stuff he's saying. I mean, he's already. If you watch the media, he's already being smeared as an anti-vaxxer. You know what I mean? Terrible
They
person.
have to destroy him.
Yeah. He's been called an anti-vaxxer for a long time, but
and that's the problem with this whole public-private partnerships that the government's trying to push. Is you're going to end up with more and more of this type of stuff where, like, the pharmaceutical companies paying the FDA to get these things approved. It's like, well, that's why the COVID vaccine got pushed through so fast, because the people writing the policies are the drug companies. And essentially it turns into, well, you're the mice in the cage. Take this so we can see what happens.
Totally.
And then, then we can adjust from there. But we're going to get paid both sides either way.
Yeah. Well, and what RFK did in his Fauci book is outline how Fauci has done this, exactly what you said, throughout history with the AZT thing and AIDS in the 80s. There's video, I think we showed it on the last one I showed you, where the gay people, like LGBTQ people, are literally storming the NIH and have Fauci's head on a pike and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and so do you know who Mickey Willis is?
No.
Okay, so he did a show called The Plandemic.
Oh, I remember that.
So
I remember the video a long time ago.
Yeah, so if you, I think you can actually go to their website. I think it's like plandemic.com, and I think you can watch that for free. But if you watch it now with the hindsight, and listen to that doctor lady that worked with him, she got jailed.
I remember,
supposedly for taking documents that she was supposed to have, that she's like, I don't have this stuff, and this stuff here is my research, not your guys. But because she had worked there, they can, I don't know, claim rights over stuff, I guess. But it makes what she was saying with the AIDS virus even back then, and what leading up through the COVID, pandemic. It's like, okay, I think what she was saying makes a lot of sense. And she was, drugged through the mud all over the place even after this documentary came out.
I specifically remember someone sharing that with me on Facebook when it happened, and then Facebook and YouTube and everyone started censoring it. And I remember arguing with some of my friends. One of my friends was like, "Oh, this woman has been totally discredited. She was arrested by the FBI." And I was like,
"By who?
That's what I said. You know what? Honestly, when I read up on her, I was like, I trust her more now because
I know. Well, and that's the thing. If you can do like you did, and just look at it with an open mind, not just saying, "Oh, everything's true," or it's
everything's left or right. It's not.
It's like you got to look at all this stuff with an open mind, and then think through it. And like, okay, why would they do this? What's their incentive? What's her incentive? And piece it together.
So
and that's what we're not doing. We're just fighting over. Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. Well, you're a lab rat. It's like, well, there's no middle ground anymore. It's like it's hard to overcome.
Part of the reason I wanted to show you that RFK clip too is, guess who was one of Tucker Carlson's guests during his last week on the air? RFK.
Oh, really?
And dude, you should see. So it was funny because Jimmy Dore used to go on Tucker all the time. And the last time Jimmy Dore was on there, he was like, "We're the terrorists of the world. Russia's not your enemy. China's not your enemy. It's the fucking people who are starting these wars. And Jimmy was like, who else on TV is going to let me say that America is the terrorists of the world? Like, and that's it's well understood by most people now. You look at like what Matt Gaetz is doing, God bless him, in Congress. Like that guy's actually putting up bills to draw down military and being smeared like crazy for it. But Tucker's last week on the air, among the things he said was he had RFK on, and he literally compared. Tucker was like, imagine that a company that advertised with you like forced you to take their product to go outside, or like he's like, imagine My Pillow. He's like,
yeah, right.
had to buy a My Pillow and then a support My Pillow if you wanted to like leave the country. That would be terrible. But
yeah.
And Tucker, bless his heart, was like, well, at least Fox didn't do that. Yeah, sorry, Tucker. Maybe not during your show, but they definitely did too.
Yeah. I don't know. It's such a strange world we live in right now.
Well, it's like that clip of Tucker and Ben Shapiro talking about truck drivers. It's like that's the kind of thing that's why he has to be censored, because if that gets through to the mainstream, the average person who's not left or right hears that and go, yeah, totally. Like, we need to protect people's right to live. And like everything Tucker said there, what a fucking Nazi. He's like, I want a country where people can be free to live happily and like have good lives. Like, what a terrible person he is.
My question is where is the money being funneled to these AI trucks and these electric vehicles? Who's making those? Because that's where the money's going.
Yeah.
And that's why there's such a push for it. I mean, I like I said, I'm totally not against electric vehicles.
Right.
But don't pretend that they're environmentally friendly. I mean, I drove a haul truck. I know how much fuel just one truck burns in a day.
Yeah.
And it's mining copper. And how do you build electric cars? With a shit ton of copper.
Sure.
And lithium that's getting pulled from these third world countries by child slave labor, and they don't use machines.
No.
I mean, it's just everybody go down in there and dig with your hands and a rock or whatever you got to shovel the stuff out of there. But because it's not happening right here in our back door, that it's out of sight, out of mind, and it's just playing on politics. And I'm a good person because I drive a Tesla.
Yeah,
and it's saving the environment. That's bullcrap.
Well,
like, eventually the technology will be there, and I just can't figure out, because I'm not smart enough to understand electric vehicles. But if it could do like an alternator system, keeps your battery charged on a combustion engine, is there some kind of system like
sense.
that? If there was something like that, you bought a car, and I don't got to go wait for an hour at a charging station so I can get another 250 miles down the road. Hell yeah, I'll spend $100,000 probably buying one, if they're good quality and will last a while.
So one of the things Elon Musk was talking about is all the regulations. He's like, I think regulation's good, but also you have to understand that it creates problems. Like, I wouldn't doubt if there's regulations that prevent him from doing things like that on Tesla.
Well, because now you can't sell power to the power company if your car can self-sustain itself.
Right.
I don't have to go to a gas station. I don't have to go to a charging station. Who loses money?
Right. And these powerful interests have literally written the laws to protect themselves. If you know how, like, a while back there was a whole thing with Elon in Utah because of the dealership association.
That was such a weird thing.
Yeah, because that is a nepotistic organization who bought politics. It's all like the dealerships are all owned by people who bought out.
Spent a lot of money.
They wrote laws to prevent anyone from going around them. And so Elon was like, I'm going to make a dealership and sell my cars direct to the public. And the dealership was like, the agency was like, no, you're not. You have to go through us because we wrote the laws that say you do. And he built a plant in Salt Lake and then had to shut it down because they couldn't get around the dealership people.
Yeah, and that's kind of the crony capitalism that's screwing all of us consumers, because if you had more entrepreneurs like Elon doing things like that and not having to go through all those other roundabout channels, how much cheaper would stuff be?
Yeah.
You know, it's all these regulations and stuff that drive up a lot of the costs.
It's so
Because
obvious.
if he could have put one of those directly, one of his dealerships there,
Yeah.
cut out all the middleman
Would be
bullcrap,
cheaper.
and a Tesla would be a lot cheaper. It'd be cheaper than buying these gas cars.
It's
I
so
mean,
obvious.
here in California, how long is it going to be before they're just shipping all those cars out of the state? Don't you guys only have like a few years before you can't sell? And
there's basically what'll happen is the industry will adapt to it, like they always have. California, to be honest, has led the march on, like, because man, I don't know if you know this, but in the 70s, the air here was super polluted. Like, it was brown, like 24/7. It was gross, and because of like catalytic converters and stuff like that, it's actually cleaned up quite a bit. So, like, California's led on that, and I think that, you know, it's good that maybe not every state has to comply with that. Maybe we start, and it kind of. But what'll happen is people who make cars will develop cars that are, you know, fit that, you know, regulation, and we'll get those.
The market will adapt.
Right.
You have to, or you sink unless you're getting subsidies from the government.
But I think you were onto something in regards that it's like democracy. There's this whole like backslapping, like, oh, democracy thing. It's like, we don't have democracy. Like the idea that like we have democracy here. It's like, I was arguing with someone the other day because about someone, what's that guy Matt Walsh said he's like, that's why I identify as a religious fascist or something. And I think he was joking. But these people were like, oh, Republicans are fascists. And I was like, yeah, the Democrats are just as bad. They just don't say it out loud like that. They go and like ban third parties from elections through legal loopholes and have super delegates who choose their party nominee or cheat their primaries.
Yeah.
Got all upset. This guy jumped in. He's like, I'm an adult and I don't come up with conspiracy theories. And I'm like, bro, it's well known that this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's completely proven.
Yeah.
So if you feel free to put your head back in your ass now. Like,
yeah. Well, and to that regulation stuff too. So now, you know, I don't remember who the guy was, comes up with this theory that gas stoves cause like autism and all these other things, you know. So that kind of got pushed aside. Well, guess who just banned any new buildings from having gas appliances in it? State of New York.
Oh man.
So here's the
weird. That is so weird
though. Well, so right now the IPP plant down just west of Delta, they are converting the electric plant over to natural gas. So guess what? You can't have a gas appliance in your house, but we'll sell you the electricity from a gas-powered electricity plant. It's all a scheme.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, also part of what the Ukraine hustle is we blew up that Nord Stream because Russia was selling cheap natural gas to Europe, and the U.S. is like, no, bro, we're selling.
Well, how do you punish Russia, the boogeyman?
Yeah.
Well, we'll take out your source of income.
Right.
It's like, oh, it wasn't us. We didn't have nothing to do it. Well, a week earlier, the president said, oh, we have ways. It's like, well, he didn't outright say that we're the ones that did it, but that kind of tells me we did it.
We totally did it. Who else would do it? I mean, maybe like Norwegians helped or something. Who knows? Because it's in their area. But like, we totally orchestrated it. Like, it's not like Russia's going to blow up their own pipeline. Like the whole thing. Let's talk about this. The Ukrainians attacking the Kremlin, and then they come out and go, "Oh, that's a false flag" on TV. Like, someone made the joke. We should arm Russia. Since they're like attacking themselves, let's start sending weapons to Russia.
Don't give them any ideas; they will. So here's the thing, too. I watched that video, and I don't even know. I can't tell if that video is even real because, like, some of these AI things they've got going on,
that's a good point.
Fake stuff. it almost looks fake to me. Like somebody digitized it and said, it's an attack on the Kremlin.
It could be.
They could totally do that in Russia. And then that gives them a reason to attack Ukraine even more with more weapons. So it's like, okay, was that a real attack? Because I mean, nothing exploded other than the drones that I could see. But you know, is the Kremlin saying, "Oh, it was an attack on Putin's life"? It's like, well, was it really? Because I mean, all I seen was this drone get blown up in the sky,
and I don't doubt that. And it's kind of like them playing the U.S.'s game. You know what I mean? Like we do that kind of shit all the time. We're the kings of it. Like the media is our thing.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so we push propaganda through our media. They push propaganda through. I mean, Ukraine does it. All those countries over there do it.
Check this out. So, listening to the Malcolm X biography, there's a whole chapter about the media smearing him, like, and the Nation of Islam, as and oh, it is crazy. Mike Wallace is the guy who does it from 60 Minutes, and Malcolm X talks about how the media specifically like repeated these certain talking points, and they all went in on them, and they got black people to like recite the lines, and you know, to him it was a very racial battle. And I think like if you listen to Malcolm X talk, he makes so much sense on a lot of stuff, but there is a layer of racism there but it's justified, right? Like people like racists killed his father.
It was the times, you know, that was the biggest crap we had going on, you know, was the trying to integrate the black people, you know, that's the reason the whole Civil War happened in the first place, you know, it was trying to get rid of slavery. Slave owners wanted to keep their slaves.
Yeah.
Because that was cheap labor. I mean, it's not much different than we're doing now. We're just outsourcing the slavery to a different country.
What's interesting too is Malcolm X says he makes a comment because it's he has that racial kind of thing going about how the U.S. and Russia are getting closer because they're two predominantly white countries. And I was like, like hearing that, I was like, oh, if only he could be alive today and see what's going on, because now
he'd be like, damn.
Yeah, now it's a class thing where the integrated black people have like, as long as they're rich, they're cool. Like they're let's get Russia. It's not even about race anymore. It's about money.
Yeah. Well, and that's my thing. It's like, I feel like I like the quote, rising tides lift all boats. And I don't care what color your skin is. I want everybody to be able to prosper. I mean, not everybody's going to be rich, but I don't want everybody to be dirt poor either. And that's unfortunately seems to be the class warfare we're ending up in. It's like, I mean, I would technically probably fall into middle class, but I feel more poor than I feel middle class. Just because you start looking at your paychecks and how much money the government takes out, but then you start following the money of where they waste it. It's like this country could be so much better if we could cut all the waste out and the government give back the money to the people. I mean, the income tax irks me to death. It's like we're taxed on so you're taxed on your money, first of all, before you even get to spend it. And then every dollar you spend gets taxed on to whatever you're buying. There's nothing the internet stuff, it used to be you could get online and buy stuff and not have to pay taxes on all that crap. Well, now the government's got involved. Oh, we're losing billions of dollars by letting the small guy get ahead, you know, not paying taxes on this, whatever stupid thing you're buying off of Amazon or something, you know, or from a private small company somewhere that didn't have to charge tax. Well, they start finding out somebody's bean counting and crunching the numbers and like, oh, there's billions of dollars that we should be collecting from these peasants so we can go blow it in Ukraine.
Well, and so on that note too, I feel like the Make America Great Again movement, or the America First movement, as it's also called, has been demonized as a white nationalist thing, where it's really about what you just said. It's like, let's enrich ourselves first. Let's take care of our own. And then when we've
got a surplus, then you know what? Let's send it and help these other countries. The problem is, a lot of the money we send to these other countries through aid goes to the government. It doesn't trickle down to the people.
It's a scam. The reason so much aid is going to Ukraine is because Biden has, outposts there to launder it. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's why Hunter had unpaid, and yeah, it's disgusting that we let it get to this point. But meanwhile, we're fighting these battles that have been set up for us to fight of left versus right, instead of, like, I had this incident the other day that was so funny to me because someone posted this quote of Matt Walsh, right? And they're like, "Oh, this guy's a terrible person." And it was a screenshot. And I go, I want a link to the real tweet, because too many people Photoshop shit and take people's stuff.
They manipulate it.
And then someone was like, "Oh, go scroll his timeline, you'll find it." I was like, "Okay." I went and found it, and I was like, "Okay, cool." And all these people were mad at me, like, "Oh, you're defending a fascist." And I was like, "No, I'm defending a fair debate. I want a factual debate, and I might not agree with everything Matt Walsh says, but at least I'm going to have an honest debate about it. I'm not going to debate some screenshot until I know it's a real thing, And
that's the thing with my podcast. It's like, I want to give you the full context. So when I put up audio pieces, I let it go long enough that you get a bigger picture rather than just cherry picking this 10-second clip of what I want you to hear. Like, I want you to hear the whole thing so you understand when you hear these other things that people are talking about, that, oh, they're this or they're that. It's because you heard 2 seconds of what they said, and then the commentators fills in the gaps. Like, I want you to hear what they said, and then you can make your determination from there.
Trump got so demonized like that because even I was one of those people who was like, "Oh, he said there's good people on both sides in Charlottesville. He's a racist."
Yeah, and but you hear the whole context, and it's totally different.
And it's not that. Yeah. The other thing is, it's proof that people with these agendas do this, and people, no one wants to check into it, and the reality is Trump has said stuff and done stuff that is racist. Like the Central Park 5 is a good example. But I think at that time, in context, a lot of people felt that way too, because they didn't know the whole story. And he was one of those people who didn't know the whole story, but had access to a newspaper and bought an ad to defame them or whatever. I bet if you asked him about it now, he'd probably regret it because they've been exonerated. He seems like an honest enough guy. I've seen him approached about those kind of things. And I just saw a clip this morning of you know who Kodak Black is? He's this like super ghetto rapper who Trump pardoned.
He's from that guy.
But Kodak Black's like wearing a MAGA hat, like he's like, Trump's my boy, and people. That's the other thing that I think is so funny is Trump had such a strong brand as the rich guy that rappers used Trump's name. There's songs and like for years, he was he's such a respected person in the black community, especially the hip hop community, for being the wealthy brand, And all of them like Puffy and all those guys became their own little Trumps in their own ways, investing in different. Jay-Z is a great example, someone who diversified, and Puff Daddy, like all those guys, the smart ones that can't rap in their 80s, took their money and, did the Trump model and invested in real estate and different brands and put their names on things.
Made money. And that's the name of the game, is to make money. And I mean, I know not everybody's going to be great at managing money, but if you at least can make money to try, it's like, I think we've so institutionalized certain groups of people that they feel like they have no way to better themselves, and they've convinced themselves in their mind that, oh, well, it's because of this that I can't get ahead. And realistically, it's the people in the politics that have created these situations that they can't get out of.
Sure.
They've institutionalized them.
The other side of that, though, is I think that narrative that like people don't want to work gets used to get people who do work mad at other people, where it's like, really, those people aren't your enemy. The majority of people who aren't mentally ill want to work. Like they want to be proud to even have
some
their
self-worth.
Totally. Like 90, I would say like 95% of all people are like that. They want, but there are those small people on the margins that need a little help or need a little discipline, need to be put in prison. The interesting thing about Malcolm X, I keep going back to this because it's something I've been listening to, is he got put in prison for, he was committing crime. He was a criminal. He was robbing people. And he got put in prison, and he took that opportunity to educate himself. He became like this like monster intellectual because he read all these books in prison. And he even said later on, he's like, I got my master's in prison, where it's like sometimes that's a situation where the criminal justice system worked, and it can work in a lot of ways. But again, it's like those people that need it will end up there, and hopefully it will reform them. But I think those people are so small. Like if we just took care of people's basic needs, healthcare, I think, is the best example. And even with like shootings, like we just had this shooting, and people, no one. This is where I get mad at the liberals, because they'll be like, "Oh, fund Ukraine. We got to dump zillions of weapons into Ukraine," and not see the connection that has to here. We do that here too. We let these companies dump zillions of weapons, and it doesn't mean that we should ban guns, but there's a degree of responsibility, I think, that should be attached to a gun that we don't have here yet.
And that's the thing. It's like something happens here, and instead of getting the people that are causing these shootings, mass shootings especially, we're going to demonize the gun, and at the same time, we're sending all kinds of weapons overseas for people to kill people.
Yeah, so it's a intellectual inconsistency with the gun violence thing. I think one of the things I wanted to ask you about is right off the bat, like I don't support a gun ban by any stretch, especially now. Like after COVID and all that kind of stuff, it's like people obviously need to have the right to own guns, and like no one's disputing that. But do you think that, there is ways to make people more responsible? Like there are arguments that, hey, maybe people should be required to have insurance. Like my take personally, and I'll let you speak to this on your own, but I think we should have a national licensing system in the same way that Canada does, where it's like, just like a CDL, if you want to drive the big trucks, you have to get that certification, and then you can have ARs or whatever. Like you can have a rocket launcher if you want, but that way people are responsible. You're never going to stop shootings. Like it's part of a free society. There's going to be that X factor, but I feel like if you force people to be more responsible, it can maybe help stem the violence a little bit. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the biggest problem with trying to do something like that is because the government will then essentially have a log of every American that owns guns and which guns, which is a national registry, which is technically unconstitutional. If it was a perfect world, I'd say yes, but unfortunately,
don't you think they already have that? Considering what we talked about with if you own guns and you talk about them on a text message, or like they know that's in your file already, don't you think?
Well, this is why they're attacking the ghost gun, because you can buy what they consider an 80% lower, which is the part that receives the magazine, and it has a serial number on it. So that's the part if you buy that one specific part, you have to get a background check. You can buy every other part of the gun,
sure,
with no big deal. But
I mean, you can have 3D print guns now.
Yeah, so it's like, is it really going to solve anything? There's always a workaround. That's the thing. No matter what laws are.
That's true. But so give you an example, right? People will say like Chicago has gun violence, but it has laws, like the strongest gun laws, which I wouldn't disagree with. The problem is it's not a nationwide law. So in Indiana has no laws in the neighboring states. So it's easy for them to just traffic illegal guns across the border into Chicago because we have interstate commerce here. And that's why I'm saying, like, maybe if we, because like with cars, right? There's a national registry of cars, and a kid could steal a truck and run it through his school, but he has to get a license, and it's like, it's a whole different vibe. Like he has to, it's much, but
well,
I feel
to
like
steal a car, you don't need a license.
But right, like,
I mean,
so these kids most of the time steal the gun from their parents if they're not old enough to buy a gun. Sometimes they buy it, but I think if there's a licensing, like, kind of set of rules there, because that's what Canada has. They have like a national licensing law, and you get checked up. You have to check in and re-register every 5 years or whatever. And maybe that's only for certain types of guns, like hunting rifles should be different. Or, I'm just curious if you would support any kind of, commerce regulation, that, because I feel like the problem isn't gun owners, and like there's plenty, like there's thousands of hundreds of thousands of millions of legal gun owners who never do anything wrong, obviously. But if people were responsible, I feel like if parents knew, hey, if I'm not responsible with this gun and my kid steals it and does a shooting, I'm going to be the one who goes down for it. It might make people a little more responsible, where it's like that with a car, right? If someone steals your car, you can at least track it. Like, you're not responsible for what they do with it per se, but it's a nuanced thing.
Let me ask you this then, because I mean, if your kid goes and starts a forest fire, and that costs millions of dollars, should you be responsible to carry wildfire insurance? I mean, there's like a never-ending thing of. Well,
I mean, if your kid's a minor, you're going to bear some responsibility for letting them start the fire. Definitely, I think there's like.
But I mean, you can't be with your kid all the time to prevent them from doing that. Is the problem.
Right.
So how do you not? I don't know. A lot of things I think comes to personal responsibility.
Sure.
Keeping your firearms where they can't easily be grabbed by somebody. I mean, even if it's not your kid or your kid's friends or somebody just breaking into your place. I mean, if they got to pack off a 1,500-pound safe, then I guess they've earned it. But.
So, I mean, the other thing with gun violence that I believe, like, to tie this back to what we were talking about earlier, having like a safety net for citizens, is if we had public health care. A lot of these mass shootings are suicidal people. Let's be honest. It's people that want to kill themselves.
They've got problems.
And instead of just, killing themselves, they want to show the world their pain, so they go out and kill a bunch of other people before they get killed themselves. You can see it almost every time. They have a manifesto or something, or they're just psychos who have no will to live anymore and are mad at the world. And so instead of just killing themselves, they take it. Whereas I feel like if we had some kind of safety net, I think that would be much less frequent. People are desperate, and it's like if we had like an NHS, like Britain has, for example, where it's like, oh, I'm desperate, I'm like losing everything, I need someone to talk to. You go to a mental health professional or something, and you're much less likely to go steal your dad's gun and kill a bunch of people at the mall or something,
Well, and there could be something to that, because it seems like, especially now, that there's getting to be a lot more noticeable health problems as far as people's brains. I mean, with everything that's gone on through the pandemic and people forced out of their jobs and maybe never recovered from it, and have just kind of gone off the rockers. It seems like I'm starting to see a lot more of that everywhere. So if there was some resources for that, I think that could help.
One of the things Trump has already put out.
How much though should the government, in a lot of these situations, before these mass shootings in a lot of these places have happened, they have either interviewed, the FBI has looked into these people, family members have called, and but nothing's happened with them.
Mm-hmm.
So and then they go on to do these shootings, and then the only thing the politicians want to do is create more gun laws, saying we need more gun control, or we need get these weapons of war off the streets, and it's like it's a semi-automatic weapon just like anything else.
Yeah,
I don't, because it looks like a military weapon because of the accessories that are put on it. It's just a false demonization of something that's not the problem.
Well, so I think the demonization thing though is done on intentional, like it's a narrative that's perpetuated by PR companies that frankly work for gun companies that sell guns to make sure that nothing gets passed that will impede their profit in any way whatsoever. It's the same kind of capture that any industry has. The weapons industry is so because I'm not against guns, but also like as soon as you say, hey, maybe we should consider some more, responsible methods of dealing with guns. Like you're saying, the FBI knows about these kids, but they can't do anything. Well, maybe that's because there's no laws on the books that say, hey, we can do something. I don't know. Maybe not. But I think the point I was making is any attempt at a conversation gets met with, you're trying to take all the guns away. And it's like, no, not at all. I don't think that's the answer in any way whatsoever. It's like when you have to get a driver's license, it's not people trying to take your car away. It's just having I like the analogy this guy Jim Jeffries uses. He's like, we have to move as fast as the dumbest people in society. It's like I take drugs like a fucking champ. I can take drugs all weekend for 6 weeks and I'll go to work the next day. But Jimmy took drugs and he killed a family. So thanks, Jimmy. Now we have to have laws on drugs, and it's like same thing with. So that's I think where I'm coming from a little bit. And as soon as you mention this, and I've gotten into it with people who I totally agree with on everything. There's a lot of lefty gun people, believe it or not. There's a lot of like pro gun people on the left who will fight me to the teeth on this. Like, you cannot disarm the proletariat. And I'm like, yo, that's not what I'm arguing at all. Because the reality is, people will say, like, oh, if you make laws against guns, then only criminals will have guns. And it's like, oh, then maybe I'll be a criminal if I need to be, come and take it. Like, the reality is, I don't think it's that slippery of a slope. I think that we can do something sensible that, isn't going to take everyone's gun. We can meet at the middle, and like, it's not going to take everyone's guns, but it might add a layer of protection that prevents some of these shootings.
Well, and that's what's been, I guess, the big major thing I've seen is we've got some mental health problems with a lot of these shooters. I mean,
all of them.
I don't see any other way you could not have a mental health problem and go and shoot.
You have to be a psychopath. You have to want to kill a person.
Wrong in there.
Yeah, of course.
So how do you prevent that? Because sometimes these people are perfectly fine. They can go legally under our, even if we had a registration of, you got to go and know what you're doing with these firearms before you can own them or whatever, and a card from the government that says, oh, you're okay to have it.
Yeah,
they can snap at any time. So how do you prevent that part with any laws?
Well, it goes back to responsibility again. It's kind of like we don't have, and like I was saying with the Chicago, Indiana thing, we don't have an across the board law for guns like we do for cars. Where it's like, if I'm licensed in California, but if I go to Utah or Colorado, I have to follow the same laws, and I have to have the same license that I have to have in California to be on the road. And again, I'm not saying that that's a one size fits all thing for guns, but I think that level of responsibility could help to some degree. I feel like we're just irresponsible about it. And the reason we're irresponsible about it, like with everything else, is because people are making money off it being the way it is. And any change to that at all is going to affect those revenue streams.
Well, and some of it too, like I said, I think it's like Chicago. I think a lot of that is just bad policy.
Yeah,
you've got. I mean, most of that there is a criminal activity of gangs. So, do you take the guns away from the citizens so they can't protect themselves when most of the violence is coming from gang shootings?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So
again, no one's arguing that.
Done. No, well, that's what they've done though. So they've taken your right to own a gun for self-defense and they've elevated that to the extreme. So if I'm a law,
is that really what they've done though? Is that like, I don't know the gun laws in Chicago, so
yeah, you can look. I mean, you can look that up on the internet. So it's like DC. DC's the same way. You cannot own a firearm. Well, if you got a badge or you're private security for any of these politicians,
but I bet you could challenge that because the Constitution is a constitutional. You know what I mean?
The Supreme Court has done that over and over again, affirmed that no, you have a constitutional right to own a firearm for protection. Right. But DC just says, we don't care. We're going to do whatever.
But again, you have a constitutional. You have a constitutional right to free speech too, and they've warped that to say that money is speech. Well, if money is speech, that means if you don't have any money, you can't speak.
Yeah. Right? Well, and that's the thing. It's just these politicians that either like this or don't like that. They don't care what the Supreme Court said. They don't care about the Constitution until it benefits them. Yeah. And they'll just steamroll you until, they don't care.
Well, I think it's funny how transparent that is too. When you look at, right, like the state attorney guy going after Trump, this Bragg guy in New York. And
with nothing to charge him with.
But then the Texas guy makes the ruling on the abortion pill, and the people in the Democrats are like, oh, we can ignore that because it's just a state attorney guy, right? Yeah. Meanwhile, this guy over here who's going after Trump, he's a state attorney we should totally listen to.
Well, and it's like I say, the whole politics thing's got so dirty and ingrained in everything that
we have to get out of that. It's this guy Chris Hedges, I think, summed it up so well. He's like, it's basically there's these two cults with dueling conspiracy theories. There's the QAnon people on the right who, have weird conspiracy theories to some degree, but have also been right about a lot of stuff. And then you have the Blueanon people who think Trump was a secret Russian spy and the 2016 election was rigged by Russia.
Well, how many people went with that narrative on everything? I mean, Hillary Clinton calls Tulsi Gabbard a Russian agent. Yeah. It's like, she's in our military. I think they would know that if she was a Russian spy. It's just all this boy crying wolf stuff all the time is getting old.
It's so obvious now that is the like, oh, look, Satan. It's like you remember that skit on Saturday Night Live, the church lady it was Dana Carvey be like, could it be Satan? Could it be Russia? They're like, oh, Russia.
Yeah, it's like they created this boogeyman and they can't let it go. It's like,
it's so the thing is, it's become comedically transparent. Like I don't know if I got into an argument. I won't name this person, but I got into it with a family member recently, and it made them mad to the point where they like took a veiled shot at me. They didn't actually call me names, but I was like, yeah, my new favorite thing is to blame Putin and Russia whenever anything doesn't go my way. Like the other day, my card got declined at the restaurant, and the waitress comes back and she's like, "Sir, your card was declined." I was like, "Listen, ma'am, that's Russian propaganda, and this is a conversation that Putin wants us to be having." and he was like, and then it's like, eventually I give her a different card. We laugh about how ridiculous that is. I give her a different card and she goes and runs it and leave. But that never happens with the press. The press never has to pull a different card out. They just use that excuse and run
every time.
It's ridiculous.
And we're supposed to believe it.
Yeah. And the relative came back with like, call me like subtle jab where I was like, yeah, I got you, pal. Like
yeah, that's the thing.
You believe all that shit.
It's unfortunately because the news is supposed to give us the facts, and then us as a society are supposed to filter through them facts and then decide what we want to do with those facts. Well, now their facts are opinions that are supposed to sway us a certain direction. And it's not healthy for the country, especially to be a free society, when you're doing the bidding of the politicians that are going to scratch your back the best.
I think what social media did too is it revealed how this has been going on for a long time. The mainstream press shapes our views and narratives. And as soon as it's like the country is like a giant water cooler, and it's like people just say stuff and we all repeat it. Oh, did you hear about Trump? Yeah, he's a racist. Or like, oh, did you hear about Russia invading Ukraine? Yeah, it was totally unprovoked. It's like, wait a minute. Like 5 years ago, there were people in Congress going, "Hey, we're sending money to Nazis in Ukraine." It's like those disappeared suddenly. Now all the Jewish people, like Ben Stiller's out here, like, "Yay, Ukraine! Let's give money to Ukraine."
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of funny because I've seen, and I don't know how true they are, but I've seen clips of Ukrainian military people essentially doing the Nazi.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if this is real, then yeah, we are funding Nazis.
We totally are.
They didn't just disappear. It's a mentality that's still going to be there. It's like, say, another one of them human conditions that never going to go away.
Well, and this is what, if you look at policy that started with George W. Bush, actually before George W. Bush, but continued through Obama to now, we fund any organization that's against the government, we fund them. So back in Ukraine elected this guy Yanukovych, who was like kind of had some pro-Russia sentiment. So what we started doing under Obama was funneling money to the opposition people who were Nazis. And then when they finally overthrew the government, we installed Zelensky. And Zelensky kept funding, like there's a whole thing. I completely forgot about this, but the first time Trump was impeached, it was because he was withholding weapons money from Ukraine because he was trying to get Zelensky to expose Biden. And that's when they impeached Trump the first time for withholding that money. So then they come out and call this unprovoked invasion. No, we were sending money to these insurgents in Ukraine to fire weapons into the territories on the border. Imagine if Russia had forces in Mexico like fighting with people in Texas. We wouldn't do anything about it. Of course we'd invade and take them out. Like that's
that the media's totally failed because they're not giving us the facts.
And they failed intentionally. And again, it's like the reason it's so crazy because I saw this trajectory when I was working for the Bernie Sanders campaign, because as soon as I criticized mainstream media on social media, I was shut off. And once Biden got in, it really ramped up with COVID, where all of a sudden it was like those mainstream narrative people who always controlled the narrative. That's what Trump broke, because they called him a racist. They did what they were supposed to do. I was just watching a thing this morning on TikTok showing all the people celebrating, like Hillary Clinton has it was like an 85 to 15% chance, and then Trump won. And they were like, even though I didn't vote for Trump, I loved that. I was like reading these articles about people crying leaving the Hillary and how they were like popping bottles of champagne and stuff. And it's like, no, you kingmakers, people had already lost faith in the media, and Trump was already talking around them. And as soon as he won, that whole 4 years they spent locking down social media, and then they kicked him off.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. They were so invested and what had convinced themselves that there's no way Hillary could lose, not understanding that these pollsters and all these people weren't giving them polls, so they were polling themselves essentially.
Well, Trump was painted as a
we got this thing locked.
Trump was also painted as such a racist. I think a lot of people didn't want to admit they were going to vote for him, but it's
because the people that were listening to him, they're like, "Yeah, I agree
not really
with what
racist.
He's saying, but I can't talk to my Democrat neighbor though, because they're going to call me a Nazi and all this stuff that's shared everywhere."
Even if you believe he's a racist, he's no more racist than Joe Biden. Like, look at the things Joe Biden said.
No shit. You know, it's like, and he doesn't even understand that he's racist.
Well, he does. He's just like lied his way around it. It's like that's the funniest part is Joe Biden is one of the furthest right Democrats there was. That's the other thing that makes me laugh is people like the uniparty thing is so much more clear now because even so take the student debt forgiveness thing, right? The Biden administration could have just done that and gone with the gusto and gone, you know what, we're going to sign an executive order. It's done. You can't challenge it. They floated that. And this is something that the Obama administration did really well. They would float these kind of left looking things and do all this big PR around them and go look, we're doing this. And then it would get shot down on the back end. They knew the court was going to challenge it the way that they did it and kill it. So that was how, but they did the same thing under Obama. This is something a lot of people missed. But they passed this bill to prevent insider trading, and it was they did press around it and a victory lap. Look, we're doing this great thing to prevent insider trading, and then the day of the Boston Marathon bombing, they quietly peeled that back.
Yeah,
when everyone was busy.
Yeah, it's the dirty parts of politics, and and then when Nancy Pelosi's the big one on that, and she's it's just participating in free society and a democracy, and I wish I had the information you had so I could invest in all those places too, because we'd all be rich.
There's a great account on Twitter that was banned until Elon took over called Nancy Pelosi Stock Tracker.
Yeah, and the people that were doing it probably got audited by the IRS.
Yeah.
No, you can't do that. We can, but you cannot.
Yeah, and this stuff needs to stop. I'm optimistic that someone like RFK he's already polling at 20% in the Democratic Party, despite his
That's
vote.
better than Biden.
I mean, they're not going to have a primary though. That's the thing. People are.
He's gonna get screwed. You
said it. You said it. You're right, because this is what's funny to follow up on that. On Twitter right now, there's a lot of people pushing for RFK, and I love RFK. I would love to vote for him, but they're not going to have a primary. They didn't have a primary when Trump was president. The Republicans, the president is there, he's the candidate. They're not going to let you run against the president. Marianne Williamson is trying to do it too, and it's all the people on the left who are Bernie people are yo, we've played this game before, dickheads. We're not going to donate to your ass.
We know where this is going.
And then when the election gets here, you're going to go, okay, vote for Biden. No.
Yeah,
fuck off.
And that's the rigged part that people hate. And it's what are we really voting for, or what am I donating money for this guy here or this lady here to win?
And Trump couldn't.
Gabbard's whole thing too. It's she had to leave the Democrat Party because she was talking common sense.
Yeah.
It was making sense, and they didn't like it. There's
a tweet she did, calling Hillary Clinton a warmonger, and my friend, this girl Misty, who I follow on Twitter, every year she'll reshare that tweet because they were unliking it. I've liked this tweet 400 times, and they take likes off it, or they hide it, and it's
and I even seen that on Instagram still to today.
Oh, they're doing it. Yeah,
I'll do, and it's it'll pop back up I'd never done it. I'm what the heck?
Facebook and Instagram are terrible. YouTube,
and all those people that Elon got rid of, where'd they probably go? They probably went right over to Google.
Listen to this. I'll share this with you before we clog up. So I started doing TikTok because I'm doing videos. I'm going to start doing TikTok. So I uploaded a couple things that I've done on YouTube, parody videos and stuff, and TikTok won't let me upload them. It's built to it's nope, copyright. So I started doing videos where I just talk to the camera, and I did one last week where I said, listen, if you really stand with Ukraine, and I hashtagged it Stand With Ukraine, you support a peace deal because Ukrainians are dying and you want them to stop dying. And anything less than that, you don't stand with Ukraine because they're not going to win. They're not going to beat Russia. And so the time needs to come where we need to sit down and decide. So that went viral, and I got I got almost 1,000 likes, or likes on it or whatever, and then all these 150 comments, and guess what happened? they flagged it for community guideline violations because I hit my cigarette thing in it, and they said alcohol. Meanwhile, I have like 10 other videos where I'm like puffing on my cig.
Yeah, and that's just fine because you didn't say anything political.
Exactly. I didn't say anything against the war in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Like that I support. All I said was I support a peace deal. I didn't say I love Putin. I didn't say, you know what I mean? It's like Russia's right. I didn't say any of that. Like I don't believe that.
If you're, and that's the thing. People, that's what I hate about the dang media again. Like I can drive around here and see people with the Ukraine flags up everywhere. It's like I don't even think these people understand what they're supporting. Any idea.
They don't.
There's like, oh, I watched the news and they said we should support Ukraine. So here's my Ukraine flag. Let me send more money to this charity, this supposed charity organization that's supporting Ukraine. It's like you're supporting the war, and these people dying is what you're doing.
All you have to do is put a Democrat in the same, it's the same exact dynamic as the Iraq War. Sure, Saddam wasn't a great person. Neither is Putin. Sure,
but he was better than what ended up there after we invaded.
Yeah,
we made it worse.
Now it's back then. It was, remember, it was you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And it's the same people. It's the same people running this war as the Iraq War. And now it's you're either with us or you're with Russia, or you're with Putin, or you're a secret Putin spy, or you're Russian.
Well, and it seems to me like it's CIA and the FBI, all the people with the information filtering it the way they want. And then, whoever's in charge that they're in control of will say, yes, this is what we need to do. So we need to send $100 billion to Ukraine to fight the Russians, because if they take over, then it's like, well, quit pushing on their borders and they wouldn't have been invading in the first place.
Yeah, why can't we have peaceful relationship with Russia? We had one and it was fine. It was fine. There was an Apple store in Moscow.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense even for the Russian government.
Yeah,
to have our capitalism do stuff there because they make money.
Yeah, Russia's not a communist country anymore. It hasn't been since the fall of communism. The Soviet Union fell, and Russia is a capitalist country. It's literally, I think it was Jimmy Dore or Max Blumenthal that said this. It's their oligarchs versus ours. Basically, the reason this is happening is because our oligarchs, the people who own all the oil and gas industry in this country, want Russia's. And they want to take Russia out. But what we've done instead is force an alliance between Russia and China and Brazil and South Africa that's probably that's going to ruin our hegemony. It's already has. Saudi Arabia is now like BRICS. Saudi Arabia has already kind of been like, you know what, we're going to let people buy.
Yeah, we're not using the U.S. dollars to buy our oil.
In the long run, it's probably a good thing that the U.S.
I mean, it can't sustain it forever, and the crappy thing is what Trump did was bring American energy to America, and we produce our own energy. We have the natural resources here. We've just never tapped into them because we've had the Middle East to say, hey, let's make a deal. We'll use your oil and we won't have to touch our natural resources.
It's easy money for these companies too. Have you seen what's going on in Mexico right now? AMLO wants to nationalize a lot of the oil profits in Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're saying that they want to invade Mexico because of cartels and fentanyl.
Yeah, I know, that's so stupid. It's like, okay, then what? So go in and destabilize the country even more?
You know what's interesting in this Malcolm X book that I didn't know about too is he talks about how I forget what year it was like the 1800s. The British are the ones who dumped opium into China and ruined Chinese, narcotized China. And there was a war back. Yeah, there's a war back then over that. So the fentanyl thing is almost like blowback from 200
Yeah,
years ago.
that's what I'd say. It's like, okay, so they're just using the same tactics back towards us. It's like, if they can catch on to what happened then and do it back, it's like, hey, you know what, this tactic works. So these governments that are authoritarian, like China especially, it's like, all right, well, we have ambition, so America is the one place that's kind of in our way of being the top dog here. So let's just start infiltrating them the way they infiltrated us and take them back down to a level, you know, that we can kind of supersede them.
They didn't even have to do anything. We did it to ourselves.
Like, we'll just feed it to them through the narco trade of, you know, and then now everybody wants to make a big fit about it. It's like, well,
right. All of our industry leaders
shit to them.
Yeah, all of our industry leaders outsourced all of our manufacturing to China for cheap labor and created this vulnerability in our economy.
Yep.
Frankly,
yeah, even our medicines, you know, we didn't really realize it until COVID hit. And it's like, oh, we don't make any of this stuff here. China makes it all, or a good percentage of it. So all they got to do is pull the switch like that, and we're screwed.
Yeah,
and on a lot of stuff.
The COVID thing is interesting too, because we obviously made that virus, and when it leaked, now it's kind of, I feel like now they're letting that information out because it helps foster that like military narrative against China, even though it was us that actually funded the research and made it possible.
As far as I understood, we're still sending money over there.
Yeah, I saw Rand Paul. I always call him Ron Paul.
Yeah,
one syllable, but no,
that's funny though, because they can expose it and it just kind of gets buried and swept under the rug and forgotten about. It's like, everybody was so worried about this pandemic that we've been paying for to study these viruses, whether they meant intentionally for it to come out, which I don't think they did. It sounded like one of the scientists caught it, didn't realize it, went out into their just massively populated area, spread it to a bunch of people, and then at that point, it's full strength. So all these people are just intermingling like they normally would and just spreading it like wildfire. Because you just seen how their map just grew really quick. Mm-hmm. And then these people that are going on vacations, they're going around the world on flights. And before long, and it would have probably happened anyways because it's an airborne virus. It just took longer, probably another 2 years to finally make its way around the globe.
The smoking gun too, that it's a lab leak, is they said if it had spread through animal populations, you would have been able to find specimen in the area that were infected with it. They couldn't find any. So it was pretty clear that it came out of the lab.
Pangolins or the bats.
Right.
It's like
someone from the lab went to the market is how it started.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't the animal give it to somebody at a wet market. It's like, no.
Well, it's
they were just trying to excuse it away, and unfortunately for them, there was people that weren't buying it.
And that's the trend with the media too, is they conveniently report on this stuff once it's like 3 months past being important anymore. They're like, oh, whoops, we got it wrong, our bad.
They don't even say that. They're just like, oh well, it looks
they don't even say that.
It did come from there. Yeah, they just like totally just.
Let's move on. Hey, look over there, Ukraine.
Like, oh yeah, it came from a lab, and the next.
So we gotta save Ukraine from the evil communist threat.
Yeah, it's ugly.
All right.
Unfortunately for us, it's us that gets screwed, the taxpayer.
But these conversations are happening now. I think people are starting to get out of that headspace. Like, I would be excited if there's been talk of a Trump RFK ticket. Like, I would be excited if RFK can't make it in the Democratic Party, if he jumps on the Trump train as VP, they would win. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. Like, they would be
and especially where he's got experience with the FDA and all those lawsuits and stuff.
Yep.
It would be great for America
and
Americans to have that knowledge in there and be able to do something with it.
Well, and
understand the system and call them out on it.
And honestly, I think a ticket like that could unite the country, because there are a lot of like Democrats who love RFK, but he's outside the mainstream and he's already being attacked just like Trump was for being anti-vax or whatever. So if they join forces, they'll be unstoppable. Like it would be ridiculous because RFK will bring the disenfranchised Democrats in. And I think Trump, he said a lot of stuff this cycle that I'm like, wow, sometimes he says stuff where I'm like, dude, if you just calm down a little bit, you could win like most of the left or the Democrats or whatever you want to call it too. You just got to like reel it in just a little bit. But he's got to.
He doesn't know how to.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He does not. But if you
that could be an interesting.
But if you listen to him talk on like that Full Send podcast, he's sharp. Yeah. Like he's mentally sharp. Yeah. I saw a video of him making fun of Biden the other day. It was so funny. He's hilarious. He's like, yeah, you see Biden, and he comes out and he's like, oh, I don't want to be here. How do I get out of here?
Yeah, I've seen that one.
It's hilarious.
It is, but I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting. It's essentially an election cycle right now, so.
It's crazy because I worked in advertising and you see how much money is in that world, man. It's an economy unto itself. Like everything in America. It's like those people, those consultants and the ad people. That's the reason that the people like Hillary were such a thing. That's the reason that Bernie could not have the Democratic nomination because all those people would be out and they weren't having it.
Well, and they say it takes almost $1 billion now to run for president. So, I mean, like I say, that's a lot of money.
But I think what's cool is because of the way technology has evolved, you have these insurgents like a Ron Paul or a Bernie Sanders who, with the right messaging, because people see through it now. That's what makes me optimistic. Like the fact that someone like Robert Kennedy is already polling so high in a Democratic primary shows you that people are getting wise. I see it even with my kids. Like they're coming around. Like my son's always kind of been with me on the like, let's be skeptical of this whole COVID thing. Yeah. And my daughter was like, you guys are evil. You're the devil. You just want people to die for a long time. And now she's come around. She's like, okay, I kind of see like.
Well, it's because they were scaring people and because it was new. Nobody really understand. I mean, you start seeing the stuff from Italy, like all these people dying, though they're not telling you that these people were old mostly in that society anyways. Yeah. And it's just like when we came to Americas and we killed off the Indian population, wasn't with guns.
With smallpox.
It was a sickness.
Yeah.
And this is a new sickness that our immune systems weren't ready for. And if you were already older and compromised, you were getting the axe. I mean, that's just how it was. And we can see that now, but
what's even worse is
it's at least good that she could see it now and it's kind of like, oh, okay, now I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I like people like Joe Rogan's take, who he's like, look, I'm not going to be mad at people who shamed me for not getting vaccinated or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't do you any good.
They were misled, and like I'm not going to. And that's the thing that makes me so mad about my liberal friends right now is I'm like, I could see clearly it's like, okay, I'm supposed to hate my neighbor for having a difference of opinion on this, and anyone who breathes could be like a threat now.
Yeah. Well, and that was my thing. I just kept doing it. It's like, if this virus gets me, it gets me. It must have been my time to go. It's like, I'm not going to freak out and just change my whole entire life because of this virus that was wreaking havoc basically around the world. It's like, I'm going to go out and enjoy my life because this is my last, time. And at least go out having fun and doing what I want to do instead of locking down in my house and just eliminating myself from interaction of other people. It made no sense.
After a while, I started to get skeptical too, because I was like, okay, people are saying that like people are dying left and right in hospitals, but like, where is the footage of this? Like, you could block people's faces out or whatever and just show like a shot of the like full hospital or whatever. Like, I'm not seeing any of that.
The ones that were doing that, like the nurses and different things like that, gone. You're off the platform. You're shadow banned, whatever they did. I mean, because they were only around for a short amount of time, and anytime the algorithm must have started catching them after a while, because then they were just disappeared. You didn't see those clips anymore. It's like, something's up, and they're trying to keep the narrative alive by not letting the actual information out. So do you remember that big, I don't know, the ship that came into New York because they knew New York was going to get hit? So this big ship shows up in there. I mean, Cuomo, gets all this praise for doing this great, magnificent job because he's out here every day doing these press conferences. Well, he basically didn't use that ship for anybody that was sick. So then there come the narrative, oh, the hospital's getting overrun with COVID patients. And it's like, they have capacity. They have X amount of beds open all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, and in the beginning, the money incentive threw me off right from the get-go. I was like, okay, you're incentivizing hospitals to throw people on a ventilator that may or may not even needed ventilators. And guess what happened with those people? They died. Like, they were dead that day as soon as they got put on a ventilator. And guess what? The hospital gets paid more money by the government for treating that person and putting them on a ventilator. So the dollar amount goes up. If you die, the hospital gets more money. They check that box and there's 50 grand. I don't even remember what it was, but it was crazy.
Yeah.
They were getting paid. So it was like a ching, 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 ching. It was a money pit of people dying.
Did you listen to the Joe Rogan with that doctor, Asim Malhotra?
I don't know if I've seen that one. There's so many of them.
It's a newer one. But he's the doctor who's a cardiologist from Britain. And is
he the one that was like really lefty and then his dad got sick and he started seeing what was going on?
First of all, you should listen to this. It's really good. This guy, so when he first got into cardiology, he's the guy who proved that butter isn't bad for your heart and that statins, these drugs that they sell for heart problems, are like pretty ineffective unless you've already had a heart attack. Like, you don't even need them. Like, they do almost nothing, but every doctor prescribes them. So he tells this story about how he did this peer-reviewed paper and on this, and once it went public, the pharma companies started attacking him, and the way that they attacked him is through like these organizations. So like they threatened his license and stuff. Like, people in these organizations threatened his license and tried to like take his job away for saying that.
Well, that happened a lot with COVID, though. A lot of these doctors that were speaking out on it, it's like all of a sudden the medical board saying, well, we got to take away your license, and it's like, why? He's just trying to give people information on what he's actually seeing instead of just going along with the narrative. Oh, you got to take this jab, and everybody started finding out that it was false.
You got to see this, because then his father died, and he studied and his dad died from the vaccine. His dad died from like a heart attack after getting vaccinated, and he goes through all this stuff about how people in Britain were doing these cardiology imaging, like they do these imaging scans, and he's like, dude, it's undeniable that like the people with the vaccinated people all had swollen hearts, all had and the unvaccinated didn't have this. After all this data showed this, and it's.
But all that
I don't know if I'll get my channel taken down for saying that, but like I'm sure I won't, because people are already talking about it now. It was on Joe Rogan, but yeah, it's crazy. But this is a guy also who luckily had the experience of already fighting with the drug companies and knew how prevalent and deep their influence was. And so when his father was killed, he wasn't afraid to ask those questions, like, hey, what could it be, the vaccine? Like,
well, and realistically, in all things right now, with politics and just general life in general, is we need to start asking questions and getting accountability for the answers. Like, if somebody, like the White House right now with these stupid press conferences, they'll get asked an actual real question and they just give them a bunch of crap. It's like, well, why even keep going to those things?
Yeah. Oh,
it's like all you're getting fed is just bull crap.
did you see the I'm gonna do a piece on this. I have like a piece planned out, but the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's I mean, all the lefty media shows I watch covered this, how ridiculous it is that they're out here celebrating press freedom while Julian Assange is in jail, Daniel Hale's in jail, Edward Snowden's like in exile.
Hiding out in Russia or wherever he ended up now. I don't even know if he's still in Russia anymore.
I think he's still in Russia. I mean, I was like, maybe that's one of the reasons they're trying to get into Russia, because it's like the Chinese government
got to take him out.
Yeah, like if we get into Russia, then people like Snowden can't hide anymore. It's
knows. It's dirty.
Yeah. Well, we can wind down, man. It's been a good conversation. I think I'm going to cut this one up into some bits too. So like we had some good like the gun thing. I think is a good conversation that I can cut into a bit. That right and left gun talk and
well, there's a lot of problems still there, and I mean, I don't know what the real solution is. I think a lot of it is, our nation,
each other too.
Well, our nation's culture has changed a lot from like when I grew up. I used to be able to drive to school with the shotgun or something in the back, and then after school go up shoot birds in the hills.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal, but our culture, I think, is shifting so far now, especially with like even us recording this right now. We didn't have this back in the day,
True.
So information can travel so much faster, and now there's so much false information out there that it's hard to dig through the mud and find out what's true.
Well, and the biggest purveyor of false information is the mainstream sources. That's on Twitter.
That's why I quit watching them. It's like, nah, that's bullcrap.
On my Twitter account, my pinned tweet is this guy Black in the Empire, who I follow, and his quote was, "The people telling us that there's misinformation and trying to protect us from misinformation it's because they want to be the primary sources of giving us misinformation, basically." And then I have a link to Lee Fong, who did a whole Twitter Files thing about the Pentagon PSYOP on Twitter.
Well, and it's so funny, even still on Instagram, with the metaverse, that they still put this is missing context, but then you click on the link and read it, it's like, oh, well, somebody said that this is, it's like, how is that a fact check? That is retarded.
It's such bullshit. Sense. I think honestly though, with that stuff, I think the market, it will correct that kind of stuff too, to some extent, because you look at like YouTube. I know YouTube was very censorious, and then Rumble popped up, and a lot of people started switching over to Rumble, and now I kind of see YouTube backing up a little bit, like, maybe we should.
They don't have the authoritarian control that they used to, so now they're like, they want to make money.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe we shouldn't keep pushing our audience off to this other platform.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, as someone who's always considered myself somewhat liberal, it's like the key word there, the root word of libertarian or liberal is liberty. Like, do unto, like, live and let live. As long as you're not hurting other people, you should be able to do what you want, whether it's with guns or gay sex or whatever. Like, if you're not grooming kids, have all the gay sex you want. If you're not killing people, or have all the guns you want, like, I think that's the way most people should look at it.
Well, and they're just trying to frame the narrative, I think, essentially just to have ultimate government control of everything.
Right.
I mean, that's looking at it from a broader perspective, and all the different things that have been going on. That's the direction it's pushing. It's just the government's people, either, in the deep state part of it, want ultimate control over everything, and they use the politicians as their puppets to do it, because they're the ones that can get fired, or voted out, if that's what you want to call it, where these other people that are kind of in the behind the scenes calling the shots.
Yeah.
Nobody blames them. Yeah.
The deep
Nobody
state
blames them.
Right. The Faucis of the world. It's crazy how again, I've been listening to all these biographies, and the parties just conveniently switch back and forth to meet the needs of the moment, right? It's like right now there's enough of like a consensus around identity stuff, and like, of course, like we should accept everyone. Everyone should be able to be who they are. But there's a limit to that where it's like, okay, now you're being like ridiculous about it.
Yeah.
But that narrative now is used to push the war state forward, where it's like, okay, we can still like do wars and do all this like corrupt garbage as long as we include like black people and trans people and all that kind of crap. Where it's like,
yeah, if they want to be in the military and they can do the job that the military requires them to do, I don't agree with the whole because the military is getting politicized too.
Right.
So, we don't have enough women snipers or enough elites, that are women or trans or whatever. So we're going to lower the standards down so they can get in there. It's like you're screwing your military might. Like there's nothing against those people, but if you can't perform to that level, that was the whole purpose the special forces were designed for. And now we've crippled that usage of our special forces.
You know what it reminds me of? When I was in high school, I played football, right? And there was this girl, Marissa Peterson, who was frankly pretty cute. But she was like, "Hey, I can play football just like you guys can." And they were like, "Okay, throw some pads on." The first day she fainted on the field. And then she was like, "You know what? I can't, but I want to be part of the team, so I'm going to be like a water girl." So she ended up doing that. And it was like everyone gave her the shot. We're like, "Fuck yeah, you want to go with the boys?" But she's a woman. Her body is a different size. She's built for different things. And it's like, what's interesting to me too, man, and I don't know how much you're on TikTok, probably not at all.
I'm not at all. Yeah, but I know the backdoor stuff with TikTok. I don't want nothing to do with
honestly, man, it's there with everything. And it's there.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, but listen to this. This is what I think you'll find interesting, because I've noticed this a lot lately. There is a definite, among the younger people, return to like kind of like standard values. And that's why I was opening up with that thing about the girl on my football team. If I was watching a clip this morning, these guys Fresh and Fit that my son watches, or like Kevin Samuels, or they talk about the roles of a man and a woman. And if you listen to these guys talk, they're very conservative guys. These guys are in Miami and they have a show where they have these hot broads and stuff. But they'll like the clip I was watching this morning, the guy's like, he asked this girl, he goes, "If you're in a relationship with a guy, would you go and post bikini pictures of yourself on Instagram?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "And if your man told you to take him down, would you do it?" And she's like, "No, that's not his business." And he's like, "Then you're not going to have a man, because that's not how it works. You expect this man to provide for you and to protect you and do all these things, but you don't respect him enough to honor him when he asks you that. Then you're never going to be in a relationship. You're never going to have a real man." If you do that,
it's going to be like a really lopsided beta male type. I want to be told what to do type guy,
He's
not going to be posting bikini pictures of him on the internet.
Dude, these guys are so smart. If you listen to them talk, because they put these women in their place too. They're like, they'll have these broads that are like, "How many kids? You have 2 kids. You're like 35, like you're not going to get a guy who has 6 figures that's 6 foot tall. Like, he's not looking for you. Are you crazy? You're not even in his wheel." They put these women in their place, but that kind of mentality that like, hey, like if you're a woman, like you have certain things that you do bring to the relationship versus if you're a man. I feel like kids are kind of going like all this crazy shit is pushing the younger generation back to those values to some degree.
Well, and I think that's what happens, when they talk about the pendulum swing, it goes so far one way that everybody's like, "Okay, we're off the rails. Let's start bringing it back to the middle."
Yeah.
And then, it'll stay in the middle for a while, and then it'll go way far off the other way and be like, "Whoa, this is getting off the rails again. Let's bring it back to the middle." It's just a cycle. You can look back through history and it's happened over and over again.
Sure.
And I think right now it's just being, especially the trans thing, you're seeing that's being pushed everywhere. So what did we have first? We had the women pay gap and all this stuff, and then now it's women are basically getting erased by dudes that think they're women. So it's like there's all this weird stuff, and they're trying to make it such a hard argument. So everybody's arguing about the trans movement, stuff like that, all while this other bullcrap's going on. And I think it's a lot of it's a distraction, and these people are being pushed to do it.
Right.
I think behind the scenes, once again, hey, we need people to be fighting. So what can we come up with to get them to fight over this now?
I've talked to gay people.
It's like, yeah, go ahead.
I've talked to gay people on Twitter that have said, like, this seems like an op. Like, they're like, I've been gay and to drag shows for years, and it's never like, no one's ever been like, hey, let's bring a kid to drag shows. Like, it's not a kid thing; it's an adult thing.
It's like it's been elevated by pushing these people. Who's bringing these drag queens to elementary schools? There's somebody that's doing that. It's not the kids like, we want to watch this trans guy dance. It's like, it's not the kids, they're just being subjected to it. And like I've said before, these kids,
it's being done to divide us. It's being done to make us mad at each other.
I mean, we all grew up through puberty and all that stuff. You didn't understand sexuality stuff, it's like, so they're pushing this gender fluidity, like you can be whatever you want. And it's like,
I think to some degree, I think it's good that gay people feel comfortable. Like, you should feel comfortable being gay. I think that's a good thing. That's a net positive for society, because when you if you look at science in history, gay happens throughout history, like as far back as Greece and Rome. It happens in nature. Like, there's gay penguins, there's gay behavior in the animal kingdom, and there's proof that when a population gets big enough, genetics mutate to that to prevent overpopulation. It's like, so you don't have as many breeders. I mean, there's studies to back this up, this theory. They did in populations of mice, where the bigger the population gets, the more instances they see of homosexuality among the rats, actually, the rat communities. And it's like, the hypothesis is, okay, maybe this is nature's way of mutating to prevent overpopulation. So, I mean, there's all kinds of that stuff behind it. But by the same token, it's like Chappelle said, it's like, you got to kind of like move, like I was saying earlier about moving with the slowest people. You kind of got to move at the pace that everyone moves at. And don't, like, I used to work for a gay guy, and I probably told this story before, but I remember him. He was very conservative, and we drove past this like billboard in Hollywood, and it had these two oiled up dudes on it. And I'm like a straight married guy, and he looks at me and he's like, "What do you think about that?" And I go, "Doesn't bother me. It's like this West Hollywood. Like,
it's like,
pretty much expect it." But he goes, he's like, "I don't like it." He's like, because it's like pushing that lifestyle in people's faces. And he's like, and that makes me uncomfortable. He's like, I'm
well,
gay.
And that's what's caused the biggest divide in this, is it's just being crammed down people's throats. And we're like, look, we don't care. You want to be trans, go ahead, but do it, in your own privacy of the clubs and stuff where it's always been. And,
you don't need to force it on kids.
Go in there. Yeah, people are getting tired of it being forced down their throats.
And there's a great, like, the argument against gender blockers and these hormones and puberty blockers or whatever, like with kids that are not even grown up. That is disgusting.
That don't understand it.
Imagine having your dick chopped off when you're like 7 or whatever, and then you grow up and you're like, wait, I'm actually kind of straight. Like, I just played with dolls when I was a kid. Like, that's the part where it gets weird. Like, kids know, like, that's mutilation almost. Like, let kids grow up. Once they get old enough, then, they can make that decision if that's what they want to do. But
yeah, exactly.
That's a rational
under ones that don't understand it.
And that's a rational, completely rational, sensible thing that will be called fascism by some people.
You can't say that though.
You can though. I think there's a couple women that I follow on Twitter that are like left, but like they're like so vocal about this issue specifically. They're like, yo, I'm a woman, like, don't fuck with me. You know what I mean? Like, you can be a trans woman if you want, but don't fuck with this shit about like like this guy, I'm a woman too. Like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's funny, with like Time Magazine and all these places giving awards to people that are male. I mean, biologically male to dress like women. It's like, oh, this is so brave. And it's like, it's not being brave. It's the turtle being put up on a post, you know? It's like, okay, how did the turtle get up here on the post? You know,
it's like what I was talking about. It's like what I was talking about earlier too with the swimsuit models, right? It's like, okay, the reason I look at Sports Illustrated swimsuit models is because they're like a cut above regular women. They're like goddesses. They're like, their whole life is their body and how they look. And they're held on that pedestal for a reason. When you start throwing like the average chick that I could pick up at a bar in the mix, okay, like this girl's not ugly, but she's not a model. You know, it's like, I'm not saying she's ugly. Like she's probably the girl I'd end up taking home from the bar after a couple of years. But like I watch those models, or I look at those models because they're like at that cut above where I'm like, man, someday maybe, like, you know, it's like, and it's the same thing with this gender stuff. It's like, okay, fine. Like, you know, honestly, if I saw this meme the other day. It's so funny. This guy's like, Caitlyn Jenner needs to cut it out. Like he's like starting to look kind of good. Like it's like, yeah. Like, sometimes like, you know, you can get away with it to some degree, but it's like, you know, we're all accepting. And to her credit, Caitlyn Jenner even has pretty sensible views about this. I think it's like good to have her out there because she's saying the kind of stuff we're saying.
I've kind of realized there's the ones that are squealing the loudest that are getting all the attention, but there's the normal ones that just want to live their lives that are the ones that get kind of forgotten about because they don't want them to hear their side of it. Yeah, they want these ones that are getting ratings and all that stuff, and we're going to prop them up versus the ones that are just like, hey, look, we just want to live our lives, you know, like everybody else. And
if we're busy arguing,
you want to do that, go ahead.
Yeah, see, and that's the side.
Don't bring all this other stuff.
Right, and what you're saying right here is not what's being heard by these people. It gets twisted to like, oh, these people want to like injure. No, it's like, no, that's not it at all. The idea is you live your life, I live mine, and like let's get together when it's something that can benefit all of us instead of like we're busy fighting about like bathrooms or whatever when like we should be talking about healthcare for everybody, or like what do we do to like stop this like constant stream of our money going overseas when we really need to use it here type stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I want to know where, so have you seen that new one that I guess it was some chick that was at a council meeting or something in San Francisco? So there's this narrative now that they're all screaming about this genocide of the LGBTQ community. And it's like, where is this coming from? Who's pushing this idea? Because it makes no sense. Like genocide, who's dying? Who of you guys are dying besides suicide? Because you got some of those people have got serious mental problems, just like the shooters do. You know, I mean, there's such a mental health crisis, I think, in this nation right now that needs to be addressed before we need to start moving on to the next whatever, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to the family stuff too. I think that's a lot more key. Listening to the Malcolm X thing, it's funny because he was one of those people who he got into Islam because it changed his life, right? It made him straighten up. It made him start to value the things that are important, like his family, and he got off drugs and like became a respectable member of society. And it's like I see it with my son. It's funny because my son will even tell me he's like this kid's kind of a dipshit and he like does this stuff, but his dad's not around. You know, he doesn't have a man to kick his ass or be like, hey, dude, come on.
Yeah, you know? Straighten him out.
Yeah, people need that. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a man. You know, there are plenty of great people that have grown up with single parents or whatever. But I think
they just need structure.
Right. What happens is when you come from a single parent household, which I kind of did because my dad was gone a lot, you have to fend for yourself. You don't have people there to go, hey, like, cut that out, or like, and thankfully for me, my mom put her foot down at points or whatever. And like, I'm sure your parents the same, but it's like kids need that. And that's the thing. Even with my ex-wife, we had this problem where it was like, look, I would discipline my kids and she'd come to their defense. And I'm like, yo, you're supposed to be on my side. Like the kids need this structure, and I know it hurts to be mean to them sometimes, but they do this kind of thing to get you to respond and enforce boundaries. And as soon as you like, I'll tell this quick anecdote of my kids, my friend's kid, my friend Drea. She got divorced, and we used to watch her son. Well, one day her son was like doing something, being an ass, and I grabbed him and was like, "Hey, motherfucker, you're not gonna do that. Get in the fucking corner." And he started throwing a fit, and I was like, "Get in the fucking corner." He's like spraying boogers all over the wall and shit and throwing a tantrum. I'm like, "Get the fucking corner and stay there until you're done." 5 minutes go by, he quits crying. I'm like, "Bro, you done? Okay, go play with the kids." His mom comes to get him like an hour later. He didn't want to leave, because someone finally put their foot down and said, "Don't be a fuck," and he had never had anyone care that much before to do that.
Yeah, and that's a lot of it. It's like I still see a lot of parents that try and be their kids, that they're trying to be a cool friend and not doing the discipline thing, and their kids are little shitheads.
Yeah.
Well, you got to roll, man. We can cut this off.
Yeah, let's close it down, man. It's been awesome, man. We should do this another couple weeks, but I think with this one too, I'll upload the full session, but I'll also cut this one up into segments too. I'm going to start doing that a lot more.